How does Windows beat Linux, and how does Linux beat Windows? And do people analyzing such things, are they right in their assessment? We're going to talk about this on today's Windows Wednesday. Thanks for checking out this video by Switch to Linux on Windows Wednesday, where we talk about the reasons why we switched to Linux from Windows. That is indeed why we bring this up. Sometimes it is the crazy dystopian thing that's going on. Sometimes it's just more little assessments, thoughts, opinions, and just maybe things to get you to think about it as we will jump in. If you like this type of content, subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a like and a comment down below. And today we're going to look at two articles from Windows Central from the same author. This is Mario Hakluak, I think that's pronounced. And he has two related articles here. One of those is Windows 11 beats Linux for most people. Here's 4 reasons why. And he also does another one, 5 reasons why Linux actually beats Windows. So there you go, guys. 5-4, Linux wins. Obviously. All right. Anyway, let's go ahead and have a look at what his reasons are. We'll start out with the ways that he assesses that Windows beats Linux. Now, I wanted to talk about this because we do make a lot of fun about Windows and everyone should switch. The reality is I think most people for their personal life should completely switch to Linux because it is secure, it is private. It's not trying to take all your personal photos and put them in someone else's cloud. It's not trying to lock your disk if you don't know or want it to be encrypted. Although encryption is a good idea, it should always be your choice and your full knowledge and consent. But there are certainly some people that need to stay on Windows for one reason or another. And so we understand that. And I don't really mind if somebody wants to stick on Windows, even after knowing all of the horror stories that potentially come out of it. And there are some horror stories out of Linux as well. I would just like people to have full consent and full knowledge about what they're signing up for. And that really is why I get into these topics. So let's go ahead and have a look at these 4 reasons, and do I agree with these particular reasons? So this intro stuff, we'll skip by that. The first he talks about compatibility. And this one, I disagree with the way he presents it, and I agree with an element of what you would call compatibility, although not the way he's mentioning in the article. But then we even have to ask on this some deeper questions about why do we think we have to use these particular pieces of software, which are all subscription-based and corporate, and software that really sees you as dollar signs and how much of your cold hard cash can they extract from the stone of your corpse as you're sitting there like watching your paycheck fly on by every single month, right? But the first he talks about compatibility. Now, what he's mentioning here is compatibility of software and what you would call the software everyone uses. Now, let's talk about compatibility from a different angle the article does not talk about, and that is backwards compatibility. There is no question of a doubt Windows is far superior on backwards compatibility. What do we mean by that is I still have in my old archives SimCity 2000 install files for Winamp, Kits the Llamas, and all sorts of other weird applications that I played with years and years ago. And I could even go onto a modern Windows 11 now and still install those programs. Linux, there might be versions of software from 3 years ago that just won't work anymore. Now, snaps and flat paks and app images have resolved some of that by packaging the full dependencies inside of the packages. So that is getting a little bit better. But even many of those, like snaps, try running an old version. I dare you. It is possible to roll back, but by default, they always want to be the latest version. And if there is old abandonware, like on Linux, for example, I absolutely love the old media program called Banshee. Well, that thing, was dead years ago, and I don't think I could confidently get that to work if I wanted to on Linux. So on that, if you're talking about backwards compatibility, Windows absolutely wins. Now, as far as compatibility, as the article mentions here, it's really talking about all of these rely on day-to-day software like Adobe Photoshop and Office 365 and the Creative Cloud Suite and Teams and AutoCAD. All right, first, Teams runs on Linux just fine. Okay, we'll start with that one. Microsoft Office, if you're using the cloud versions in a web browser, it'll be fine. If you're using a desktop application, you're probably not going to get that to work. But we have this thing called LibreOffice. We have OnlyOffice, and we have about a dozen other various Office suites as well. And yes, I hear people go, well, those are not compatible. I'm sorry. At this phase of the game, I'm just going to say if you're whining about compatibility in those applications for the average user, you're just dumb. I cannot be any nicer about it. Okay, I use those in full professional settings. I write books in those, completely format them, and send them out to the book distribution networks, and they get sold everywhere you can buy a book online. Buy one of my books, like Code Red, and look at it, and I promise you, it is one of the best designed books, and it is all done in LibreOffice. All right, it is absolutely compatible. Any of these weird little compatibility issues you're talking about, you're usually talking about different system fonts, or you're talking about there's a couple of things that have been out there, but it has not, like, there has not been any real compatibility issues with LibreOffice and Microsoft Office for a long time. Adobe Photoshop, there are alternatives for all of the Adobe Suite softwares. The challenge is that now we got to wean ourselves off of Adobe, which is this deeply abusive company. And maybe we should start questioning, do we have to use these software packages? But if you're talking about needing to use Adobe and needing to use Office 365 and needing to use AutoCAD, yeah, I do not know of there's some open alternatives to the AutoCAD, but I don't know them as being particularly good from what I've heard. I'm not as familiar with the package, so I can't comment on it much more than that. So yes, if you have to and you are committed to and you refuse to change, and I understand there's certainly some industries that it would be a big momentous fact to change, but a lot of people using these applications, there's no technical reason they have to use this over an alternative. But if you are talking about those applications, yes, you will get some better support there. Although the latest improvements in Wine are now making it so that some of those programs that used to not install are installing now. The next is hardware support. This one has a little bit of merit in it in that there are indeed some weird niche hardware pieces that are specifically designed in labs, and they are specifically written to work on one particular system. And I know some people that work with and have whole foundations working with blind folks, and there are some software applications. There's actually an application that I know the person that actually tests it in pre-development, and it's actually a pad that will translate what is on the computer screen directly into Braille. And so he can basically utilize any computer system as long as it's Windows in Braille. Now, that software, that is such a niche piece of hardware. The developers of that niche piece of hardware have only released the software, the drivers for it inside of Windows. That guy even uses Mac for most of his things because it has more accessibility options that function better than does Windows. So that guy generally uses Mac. He's tried Linux, hasn't gotten it to work because of accessibility. Tried Windows, doesn't like it because of accessibility, but Mac works really well. But he's using the Windows for this new niche piece of hardware because that is the only platform it works on. So if you're talking about those weird niche things, yes, that's true, but that is because the developers are releasing things for it. As far as other drivers, I actually kind of disagree with this on a general basis, just a general basis. Because if you're talking about the run-of-the-mill stuff, and they mention it here, you got your mice and wireless and your web cameras and things. I do not have problems. I got to say, I had one problem on one computer with one JLab mouse. So I switched out the Logitech for JLab with my MX Linux Raspberry Pi. The mouse I'd originally gotten did not work with the Raspberry Pi, but it did work on every other computer I had. Not sure what the situation was there, but there were potentially other issues. I ended up taking that one back and replacing it with a different one. But as far as your basic stuff, Linux has just as good a support on Windows. In fact, it is less of a barrier to run them on Linux than it does on Windows because the drivers, a lot of these things, the drivers are baked directly into the Linux kernel, whereas on Windows, now if you go out to the store and you buy a Windows computer pre-configured, you're fine. But you go to the store and just buy a copy of Windows and build a piece of hardware and go to install Windows on it, you are going to be hunting down drivers, even in the modern age of modern Windows. You are going to be hunting down some drivers. Linux, you generally do not have that problem. And if you do need to hunt down a driver, it usually is something that is already in a repository. You don't need to go on weird and shady spots on the internet. Not that you necessarily have to for the Windows drivers. Usually it means tracking it down on the manufacturers, but there are a lot of driver utilities now in Linux that will search up those drivers from the official sources and get those installed as well. So I'm not totally sure I agree with that. Although, yes, certain Wi-Fi cards or Bluetooth adapters may not work on some versions of Linux, depending on if they're brand new or particularly niche companies that don't generally support Linux. For the most part, though, that is not a valid thing. That does mention here fingerprint readers, or remind you the latest Linux Mint has all the drivers for all of the modern fingerprint readers and a full utility to manage those for authentication in your computer. So I'm not sure if that's a particular thing either. But yes, if you find niche hardware, it may have a problem. All right, gaming, I'm going to have to say, yes, there's a part of this that is true, and a part of this that is false. The part that is true is that there are certainly some titles, particularly with the kernel level anti-cheat, that simply will not work on Linux at all. That right now is, I think it is less than 10% of games. But here's where I'm going to disagree with this point. There was an article, we covered it not too long ago, that many people are switching, they're dumping Windows 11, going back to Windows 10, or switching to a Linux base because gaming on Windows 11 is a universally bad experience. People are finding you either have to run it through serious debloat scripts, or you have to go back and use Windows 10 in order to get the gaming to work. Many of those games that are not the kernel level anti-cheat, many of those games actually right now are shown to work better under Linux than they are under Windows. There is the caveat that oftentimes these games, you need to tweak them quite a bit more. You have to make a lot of adjustments. That is the downside. So this one here, yes and no. It may or may not be correct. All right, and then less friction. Now this one here, he actually puts effectively the same thing here as an advantage for Windows here, but an advantage for Linux as well. And this deals with making your choices. But I do have to kind of laugh at the logic a little bit. He mentions over here, Linux offers your total control, and you have so many decisions, desktop environments, display servers, basic system behaviors can quickly turn routine setup into an ongoing project. Okay, I do disagree with that characterization, because once you get your Linux system set up, you generally don't have to keep working on it. All right. So yes, when you're setting it up, that certainly is an issue. But once it's there, it's generally there. Now, flexibility is an appeal, but for everyone else, it's mental effort. I understand that. Some people are overwhelmed by the choices. You stick with a simple distribution that doesn't give you a lot of other options, and you're perfectly fine. Okay. So yes, I will agree, and no, I will not agree. So this one here is one of those, kind of depends on this. But what's funny here, this is where I kind of disagree with them most. Microsoft handles most of the decisions for you. You may not like all of them, but you usually don't have to think about them. So pleb, you can't adjust your system. We are in control. We have assumed control. We have assumed control. Let me know in the comments who that's from. All right. Let's see. So apps installed the same way. Most peripherals configure automatically. Features are designed to work out of the box. Predictability matters with when you work with multiple apps, games, and a growing list of connected devices. That though is true for Linux as well. So I'm not sure I'm going to agree that's a Windows only thing, depending, of course, on which Linux you are choosing to use. But it does mention here that Windows 11 does take a lot of the struggle out of making the decisions on your setup. So let me know if you agree with any of those 4 reasons why Windows is better, or if you agree or disagree with my assessments. But now we'll talk about how the same author talks about 5 reasons Linux actually beats Windows 11. Yes, we said it. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. All right. So here we have Windows 11, and they're comparing this to Zorin OS. Again, this is the introductory stuff. Let's look at his costs. Number one is the cost without the catch. 100% completely agree with this assessment. Windows, even if you're buying the computer with Windows pre-installed, that cost of that license was built into the computer. So you got to keep that in mind. But with Linux, there's no activation screens, there's no license keys, there's no freemium, like no free tier with paid extras outside of a couple of little exceptions he threw out here. There's been a couple of those weird little ones. And then there's Zorin, where you can get everything for free, but then there's another suite which contains a lot of extra themes and a few extra packages that you can pay for. Mostly, a lot of people would pay for that for like support. You get better tier support with that as well. But yes, it is completely free of charge without having to worry about the thing, stopping working or things like that. So that is one, I will completely agree with that. Hardware requirements that respect reality. Linux runs on machines Windows 11 would rather forget existed. This is one I have been talking about a long time. Most of your, I think pretty much any computer you'd have out there in the world, you can probably get to Linux to run on in some way, shape, or form. So in this case here, what they're talking about here is Windows 11 has these stringent hardware requirements that really forces people into having into really upgrading your computer if you do not have a couple of specific things. Linux is like, no, I'll just install on that thing at all. You've seen the memes, the how to get Windows to run, it's the latest thousands and thousands of dollars PC, and then how to get Linux to run, and it's like a circuit board hanging out of a potato. Okay, as long as that potato can generate enough power here to run that circuit board, you can get Linux on that thing. I mean, heck, they got Linux and Doom to run on, electronic pregnancy tests. So go figure, right? All right. And then control and customization that actually means control. So this is that counterbalance to that fourth point over there on Windows, that in this case here, if you want to have full control over your system, you have the option. Now, if you're like, I don't care, I just want a system that works out of the box, use a Linux Mint or an MX Linux is good. We showed a Linux Lite the other day. A lot of these distributions work really well out of the box. But if you're like, I really want to play with this thing, I want to do what PewDiePie did on that distro he had. Oh yeah, just go ahead and install some form of Arch like CachyOS, and you can choose and customize every little fine tweak of the system. You have an unlimited number of possibilities for your desktop environment, your workflow, how everything looks, how modern it looks, or how old it looks. All of that stuff, super easy. You have full and total control. And that is what is a lot of people really like. So this one here, this is why it's listed as an advantage in both lists. Some people don't want that much customization. Some people want that much customization. I love that much customization, me personally. All right, number 4, no AI features to manage, disable, or avoid. So yes, they mention here that if you want AI on Linux, you're going to be installing it. All right, and that's really the way it should be. The AI should not be dripping out of every little tiny corner of your operating system. The operating system serves to run the program and give you the tools you need without interfering with your day, whereas Windows really wants to interfere with your day. So Linux doesn't try and read your emails, doesn't summarize your files, doesn't analyze your screenshots, and doesn't install background AI services that make you hunt through settings to turn them off, or half turn them off, is what he says in the article. So yes, this is a major advantage of Linux, is it does not have all of this AI crap thrown upon you in the event that you don't really want it. So that certainly is an advantage with Linux. Of course, if you want AI, you have all of the tools to install it if you want. Number 5, minimal telemetry and privacy by design. This is the reason I switched to Linux, because I do not want my operating system collecting any form of telemetry. I do not want my operating system communicating with the home servers at all, period. This is my computer. I don't want you to connecting with whatever server you got. And that really is the direction that I really want to stand firm with. And so, yeah, That is true. So minimal telemetry. This here is absolutely the reason I existed. So they say when telemetry exists, it's usually disclosed and optional. You can see what data is collected, what exists, and how to turn it off. Privacy is treated as a default, not the advanced settings buried 3 menus deep. That is all true. They say here Windows 11 collects data to improve the product, but it's not very transparent. I don't even think it improves the product. They've been collecting data for years, and they still managed to botch the entire update cycle this year so far. So I don't know, man. That's don't tell me it's there to improve the product. You know, it's there for their own data collection purposes. That's the truth about it. So I do generally agree with the Linux list more than the Windows list. Although, yes, there are indeed a few merits to running your Windows system if you need to do that. But I would still say, hey, even on the same piece of hardware, you can run Linux on top of your computer without actually changing anything on the internal specs of the hard drive as well. So this is a way you can use one computer, use your Windows operating system for the things you need Windows for, and then jump on into Linux when you want to do something that you want more privacy or more control in your life. That certainly is something you can do. And I did that for a number of years. The computer that I had as my central media-based computer, that actually had Windows on the internal hard drive. It got to the point where I booted it maybe a couple times a year. But it had that, and I actually ran that entire computer completely flawlessly on a spinning Rust external hard drive. And you wouldn't know it if I didn't tell you that. And basically, when I plugged the hard drive in, it would run Linux without doing anything else. And when I unplugged the hard drive, it would boot into Windows. And honestly, actually, the Linux ran better than the Windows most of the time, which is kind of funny. But there are some thoughts. Let me know your thoughts about all these in the comments down below.